Hello, fellow classmates and Dr. Darmore. My name is Valeria Espinoza, and myself and my group members will be presenting on the British Free Cinema alongside the documentaries Mama Don't Allow, O Dreamland, Every Day Except Christmas, and Free Cinema. In the film Free Cinema by Lindsay Anderson, various films created as television documentaries do not accurately represent Britain and the struggles of all citizens. Aesthetic escapism versus social realism. Aesthetic escapism. If you are watching a movie or reading a book to procrastinate or to avoid an uncomfortable reality of life, then that would seem to fit the textbook definition of escapism. People tend to show distaste towards motion pictures that remind them of the usual everyday life of the working class. Rather, they prefer watching celebrities act in unknown environments with an unfamiliar setting that serves as a catalyst for escapism. Alienating experiences such as those encountered at work or other unpleasant life experiences put people in need of escaping. As Anderson concludes in his documentary, he states that the free cinema movement was over by the mid-1960s. He comments on how the dream of the New Left faded, and he refers to the New Left as to those in power and high socialism. Their belief focuses on wanting a better life from what society was giving the working class. In this case, the free cinema movement, along with other directors, playwrights, or anyone else who held similar views to them, were assumingly regarded as being part of the New Left. Therefore, this contributed to why the documentaries and films were simply selecting their actors and actresses to be one of the working class and portraying how they went about their lives in the most authentic way possible. Social realism. Social realism focuses on topical issues that are present in the working class people or people living in poverty. It gives a focus on the everyday and gives the audience an experience in the authentic showing of the world and society for what it truly is. Social realist films were keen to show the effects on society and depict the problems endured by the working class and the underclass, including the homelessness, unemployment, ambition, and the inequalities of the social class. This genre gives specific emphasis on the working class, showing the British public a vision of themselves that defined the working class movement. The working class realism was first explored through a series of films produced in the 1950s and 60s in what has been described as the British New Wave. The New Wave refers to an alternative so-called classical Hollywood films whose dependence on compelling narrative, glamorous stars, and popular genres was widely influential. The British New Wave partially explains why Anderson and his crew decided to end the Free Cinema series. This decision showed the limitations of the project as an end in itself. Our films were humanist, not sentimental, is a significant quote said by Anderson. Examples of what constructs social realism are, number one, the use of real people. Filming non-actors within their own environment and space makes the film more genuine. Number two, social class. It pushes the boundaries of filmmaking to put real-life experiences that the British working classes face every day. And finally, number three, the locations. The location of the film sets a tone of dull and gray to represent the bad mood of the film and the poor conditions of the people in different cities. How did free cinema start? The working class was viewed differently after World War II, so when it was over, groups noticed the lack of common men in many documentary films because most were funded by the government. Therefore, there was much criticism on integrating the working class into documentary film. Beginning in 1947, groups of young people at Oxford University started Film Society magazine, which later became Sequence. The attitude of the free cinema movement began with this magazine, as Anderson coined the term free cinema and wrote about how he defined it in an article he wrote for the magazine. Anderson had said in one of his articles that free cinema has the advantage of being inclusive rather than exclusive. The magazine was not concerned with the conventional values of any typical magazine. It was either strongly against some things or strongly for others, regardless of the opinions of conventional magazines. Finally, the contributors of the magazine branched out to practice what they had learned. For example, Lindsay Anderson went on to create O Dreamland. How did free cinema start? The Angry Young Men, mid-1950s. The Angry Young Men were a group of novelists, playwrights, and political essayists who were working and lower middle class. The lack of individuality was because the films were being heavily influenced by the government. The control the upper class had over the government, education, media, etc., knocked down the working class and any contributions they may have had to the same elements. Their agitation influenced documentary film, which caused the production of small, highly influential groups of films and filmmakers that called their works free cinema. The purpose of British free cinema. What people thought it was. Free cinema was written off as unimaginative social realism or greatly political propaganda. However, these films were actually aware of the world around them and meant something because they weren't escapers. What people thought the purpose of free cinema was versus what the real ideal behind free cinema was. Documentary film was a British tradition to show not propaganda, but a contemporary reality. It was after a freeze of 10 years following World War II that a new generation of writers began to make their mark for the film industry. Although these producers were often regarded as angry, the films were simply meant to break from the mold of the British respectable films which weren't doing anything remarkable at the time. British cinema was criticized for being boring and having no national character. It differed from Grierson, who focused more on machinery and civics in his films that were privately sponsored, while free cinema took British cinema into unexplored territories in order to escape the poetry of everyday life as a means of expressing uncelebrated life on the screen in a realistic manner that gave the country a better sense of nationalism. People were dismissive and antagonistic of free cinema because there wasn't much content and claimed it all looked the same. However, the creators took pride in their films for expression and weren't interested in much of the technique aspect. Free cinema shows were prestigious like opera or sports. They were thought to be too harsh to be accepted as entertainment, yet it was for the middle class and meant to show common experiences in order to unite people and relate to individuals. Controversial themes are hardly smothered out in all the free cinema films because they had faith in the unspoiled and unbeautiful in the traditional sense. Oftentimes they would cover topics that discussed asexuality, pregnancies, and troubled love life, just to name a few. The free cinema movement slogan, "Perfection is not an aim," should be understood in the sense of devaluing and revaluing. So-called deficiencies are integrated and accepted into the film as part of the whole. They help to create meaning and to send a message. The purpose of the British free cinema. The style of free cinema was humanistic and not sentimental. You could feel the executable thrust towards drama towards the feature film. How the free cinema changed from the 50s, 60s, 70s to now. In the beginning of the mid-50s, no one was paid to produce this content. However, it cost virtually nothing, and so individuals took it upon themselves to create these rough-edged, unpolished pieces of work because they weren't bland investments of the British way of life. Transitioning to the 60s, the free cinema movement was soon over, bringing upon the opportunistic 70s, which meant relevance was out. However, free cinema's new purpose was found in becoming a voice of warning, leading it to be moral as well as radical. Throughout these decades as technique developed, from silence, music playing, voiceovers, narration/real-time sound, this pushed free cinema forward and allowed for these voices to be used in an impressionistic style. A radical spirit is more creative than a conformist one. We can only aim to make change by telling the truth. General editing aspects of British free cinema. British free cinema had an editing style that made it unique from other documentaries. In these films, you can see the main concentration is on the sound, how it relates to what is going on, and the editing techniques. In these films, the images are always seen in black and white with an underexposed and grainy effect to it. A wild track is used, which is recorded on-location audio, which is used later to edit to maintain footage that it matches correctly with the film. A main editing aspect that is used is that the films to tend to show candid shots, then goes to focus on certain person or subject to raise awareness to what is happening. Films were shot with a spring-wide Bolex 16mm camera with a slow-wide and black and white film. Although it was portable and lightweight, film reels limited the length of a shot and needed strong lighting to capture images, which made the editing of clips very limited. In this clip, it shows how the editing techniques of the British free cinemas were used. It shows the use of black and white. The candid to-focus subject is displayed in the barbershop clip, where the focus directs mainly to the barber cutting his hair. The audio in that clip focuses on the cutting of the hair. Also, in the chicken clip, the focus is very candid, and editing is used in the sound and the order of the clips. What made the technical editing aspects of British free cinema different? Due to the fact that there were minimal resources and financial limitations, British free cinema had to work with what they had. That made the technical and editing aspect much more restricted. The main technique that was used was that it was rough and thrown together. It lacked polish and crispness. Many shots were filmed on spare government film stock, which meant many shots were scratched and poor quality. Filmmakers had to come up with a creative way to make these films unique due to the poor quality and harshness. They would do this by editing sounds through both natural and added music, using images, and finding a way to create a symbolic contrast between both. Oh Dreamland, Mama Don't Allow, and Every Day Except Christmas were focused around the working class citizens placing importance on the day